Hey everyone, today we're going to be looking at a Maliss deck profile list that I've been really having a ton of fun with. So, first things first, we're going to talk about the Maliss cards between the main deck and the extra deck, and then we will focus on the rest of the cards. So, just looking at the monsters, for Maliss we have 2 Cashier Cat, 3 White Rabbit, and 3 Dormouse. You may be asking why 2 Cashier Cat, why not 3 or 1? Well, it's simple. Just being able to actually use this card for combos as well as getting its effect, it's way easier and more consistent when you have 2 as opposed to 1. And for those of you wondering why not 3, well, if you only have one Maliss name in your hand, then one Maliss card period in your hand, you effectively cannot use the effects of Cashier Cat, because Cashier Cat needs to banish one Maliss card, whether it be a monster or a spell or a trap, from your hand to then draw 2. Meaning if we don't have those cards, this card doesn't really do much of anything. It's also worth noting that all 3 of these cards have 3 effects. The same effect for all of them is the fact that if they are banished, you can then pay 300 life points to then special summon them once per turn. The additional effect that they have is whenever Maliss links are pointing to them, they give those Maliss links another effect. So in the case of White Rabbit, if one of your Maliss links were to then do battle and beat over a monster, it would then be banished as opposed to being sent to the graveyard. Looking at the next card, White Rabbit, which we do run 3 of, whenever you normal or special summon her, you can then set a Maliss trap from your deck to the board, right? So this is really, really nice, and when we get into the Maliss traps, you'll see exactly why it's nice. The other effect that she has is whenever a Maliss link is pointing to her, you do not take battle damage. So that's very useful, and there are obviously going to be matchups where you want to end with this pointing to one of your monsters, or maybe this, at least maybe even in the battle phase too. And then the best of the 3 of these is Dormouse in my opinion, because when you normal or special summon her, she can then target any of these names from your deck and then banish them. And then of course you could then pay 300 life points if you haven't summoned them already with a special summon, and then you get them out. Additionally, whenever a Maliss link is pointing to her, they cannot be destroyed by card effects. So for example, if we had one Maliss link and Dormouse, they use Rengeki, then just Dormouse gets destroyed. So they would have to Rengeki twice if they wanted the Maliss link, or use Rengeki with another board breaker. Okay, so now we're going to go to the field spell. The field spell is amazing, and we do run it with terraforming. The field spell is essentially a starter. So whenever you activate this card, you can then banish one Maliss card from your hand, deck, or graveyard. The graveyard part will be really important once I get to the end of this. So while you have 3 or more banished Maliss traps with different names, then those cards get 3000 attack. That's typically something you don't want to happen. I don't have that come up, but it does come up sometimes, I guess, like every once in a while, but ideally that does not come up. Also, while you control any Maliss link, your opponent can only target those cards for attacks. So that means cards like your SP Little Knight get a little bit of protection. I know a lot of times people will try to go into a battle phase when they see an SP Little Knight, beat over that card, and then maybe try to build their board, and then this card is inherently saying, no, you're not. You're going to actually use effects and try to play through my board. So this card is great. Now, I have the traps here. Now you'll see that I'm only running one of this, and 2 of this. These traps, you essentially want to run 1 of each of them, and between MTP7 and TB11, those are the 2 cards where you could consider running 2 up for either of those cards. I don't see lists that typically have 2 of both. It's usually one or the other. And I personally prefer TB11 because TB11 is a bit more flexible. It gets you another card on the field, and it's really nice for extension and recovery. It does kind of everything that you would ever want from a trap. Also, it's cool to know that whenever you set any of these traps, it does not matter which one, you can use it the same turn it was set if you then banish a Maliss monster from your field. So that includes your extra deck monsters too. And then you could then get the effect of that card and the trap. And the cool thing about the traps is I use a Maliss card with a set trap. They're like, oh, I'm gonna ash it. You respond with your trap, you banish your card, you get their effect, and then you get the effect of the trap card too. So this deck does not have the hardest time playing through opponent hand traps so long as you're setting these traps first before the monster is actually doing its effect. Okay. Also, it's important to know that when you use this card, that Maliss card cannot use any of its effects with the exception of when a Maliss monster is pointing to these cards right here, which I forgot to mention that the part of this card that's important with the graveyard is the fact that if a Maliss Link were to end up in the graveyard for some reason, you could use this card to then get it out of the graveyard, meaning you would banish it from the graveyard and then you could special summon it that once per turn right there. So pretty good. Okay, so that is all the main deck Maliss monsters. Now we are going to look at the links because we did mention them a little bit. Starting with Cryptor. Cryptor is probably the best of these three. So Cryptor, she has a quick effect and it allows you to shuffle one of your cards back into the deck, and if you do, you can then banish a card on the field. If you are then pointing to any monster, it doesn't matter if it's a Maliss, a Link, whatever, so long as it's pointing to any of your monsters, then the effect's activation and the effect itself cannot be negated. That is crazy. And her followed with another Link are exactly why we run so few of the traps. Additionally, when you banish her, she comes back with double the attack. So she immediately comes back as a 5,000 beat stick. So that's pretty good. Another thing to note is with these cards right here, these cost 900 life points to summon back. These only cost 300. All of the cards that I'm talking about now are a once per turn, and I forgot to mention with White Rabbit, right here you can banish one Maliss monster from your deck. Also, all Maliss monsters you control gain 600 attack. So she's coming back as a 5,600 beat stick, and every blue moon she might have over 8,000 attack because of the field spell giving her an additional 3,000, so 8,600 attack. She's kind of crazy. And then our next card is Red Ransom. Her first effect doesn't come up that often. I mean, it's nice when it does, but it doesn't come up that much, which is whenever she's pointing to a monster, she switches the attack and defense. So a lot of monsters, that doesn't matter, and it obviously doesn't do anything against Lynx, but hey, when it comes up, it's kind of nice. The thing that makes her great is the fact that whenever you summon her, you can then get the field spell, which is, again, a one-card combo. Whenever you banish her, you do have to pay the 900, like with Cryptor. You summon her back, special summon, and you can banish one Cyberus card from the deck. Not a Maliss, but a Cyberus. Meaning when you're running other cards in your deck that are not Maliss, you can get them banished. And in the case of Thoughtscaper here, when you banish them from the deck, you can then just summon them out. And then the last card, White Binder, whenever you get her out, you can then banish 3 cards in either graveyard. The key note is either here, because it's not just your graveyard, but both graveyards. So you banish 3 from the graveyard, and then you can set 1 Maliss trap from your deck or graveyard. So on top of having Cryptor to then shuffle a Maliss trap back into the back into your deck, you then have White Rabbit to then bring that card back from your graveyard as well. So yeah, we have 2 ways of getting these traps back. One is slower by just putting it back in the deck. She can put any card back in the deck, of course, and then she can put, something from the graveyard back on the field or something from the deck back in. So you get it back in the deck and then you can use her. Really, really nice. And whenever you banish her, you pay the 900 life points, and then you can draw a card. So, very awesome. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and look at the main deck cards, and then we will then get back to the extra deck. We're going to be looking at the cards that are not the Maliss cards. So we already talked about Dotscaper. Just for reference though, his effects are once per duel. So once you use him that one time, you're probably not going to use him again. We are running a Bystal package here. I've seen some lists that don't. I feel like if you're not using some amount of Bystals, a minimum of 3, which is still kind of low, you're not really playing Maliss right. Because these are all quick effects that can then banish a card from your graveyard. Meaning, let's say we go to my opponent's turn, and then they start removing my cards from the field and they start going to the graveyard. I can say, I don't care, I'm bringing it right back. And then I just quick effect, push the card from the grave to the banish, and then I resummon it. So you should always be running some amount of Bystals. I like to mix it up a bit, so that way I have a lot of different options to get them out, because essentially it's the same thing. It's just these guys are all once per turn. I can't do this into this, but I could do this and this same turn. So just having these cards is really nice. On top of that, if you happen to draw only one Maliss name, you can still combo really hard with just one Bystal. All you would do is, let's say I do Cashier Cat, the one that can't even do anything. Normal summon Cashier Cat, okay? Then I could link off Cashier Cat with Link Decoder. Then I banish Cashier Cat with one of my Bystals, and now I have 3 monsters on the field. I go into Red Ransom, she gets Field Spell, and now I'm going full combo. So even with just this girl in my hand, and no other cards to do anything with in terms of Maliss cards, I can still make something happen. So these cards are crazy, and I just run all of these because they're all once per turn, meaning that 2 Drew Swarms, I can only use 1. The only reason why I use 2 Drew Swarms is because whenever you send Drew Swarms to the graveyard, you get that pop, so it has a little bit of extra utility, right? I would love to run multiple Magnum Muts, but you can't. It's a one of. He searches a Bystal, so then you have a Bystal going into your opponent's turn. I love Allure of Darkness. I think this is a 3 of. I've seen some builds run it as a 2 of. The few times I see it where people don't run it, I think it's a mistake. This deck is almost entirely dark monsters. So you're always going to get the effect of being able to keep your hand. Like, you're going to banish 1 from your hand, 1 dark, and then you're going to draw 2. So when you use it with these girls up here, you banish 1 of them, you special summon them out, and then the only card that's actually in the graveyard is this. You have 2 cards in hand and 1 of these on the field. Amazing card. This is also equally amazing. And for those of you who play Master Duel, when this deck drops, if this is still at 2, you run it at 2. You pick any of these cards, you banish them, and then you special summon them out that same turn. You don't have to wait around. So this is super nice. 3 Ash because she's crazy. 3 Emperor because it's crazy. 2 Small World. Okay, so this deck has a ton of starters, and it has a lot of hand traps, as you can see. But the one problem you sometimes run into is you don't always have a good blend of both. So what you would do is, let's say I open double shifter. Okay, you already know I can't like double dump the shifter the same turn. I would have to do a lot. And essentially until I clear out the graveyard and then wait for a couple turns, this shifter is dead in my hand. So I can just say, okay, I'm going to make my shifter into something else. So I go Small World, show shifter, find a card like it in my deck. That is Luna. Luna is your bridge. And then you can go into any of these. You can also be like, okay, maybe I have too many starters here. You can pick one of these, go into Luna, go into a Bystal. You can do that. You can also, instead of going with shifter, for example, like let's say you have too many Bystals in your hand. You could show Bystal, go Luna, any of these. This card is amazing in this deck. I run it as a 2 of as opposed to a 3 of, just because this is a hard once per turn. So if on the rare occasion I draw more than one of these in my hand, at least I don't have too many dead cards in my first initial draw. Luna is the bridge. She's also kind of useful because she can then banish a dark monster from my graveyard, and then you summon her. So on the rare occasion where like I end up with Shifter and this in my hand, you know, I just shift her, okay, and then I push her up, yep. And then so long as I have any other card I can normal summon, like any of these, then I can make my plays. So yeah, she's still fine to draw. I don't want to draw her. I'd rather her be in the deck, but if I do, I can still make plays. And I do have 3 Shifter because yes, this is a Shifter deck. There's no other way to go around it. You need to run 3 Shifter. All of these cards, whenever it's like battle phase time and they start beating over your monsters or just outing them, if you haven't special summoned them yet that turn, then they go to the bench instead of the graveyard and they come right back. Maliss is an extremely resilient deck. And it's not just resilient to the hand traps, it's resilient to just the normal ways of outing cards. They just keep coming back. So you just run 3 Shifter. And of course, your Shifter is a free body for your Bystals, it's a free body for your Luna. So yeah, it's important to note that your combos cannot go as far under Shifter, but the thing to keep in mind is when you're ending on something like a Cryptor, an SP, and this guy right here, under Shifter, with any combination of hand traps, you have a pretty hard board to actually just straight up crack. So that's something to keep in mind. And then we do have 2 Dominus Impulse because this card is great. For those of you who don't know what it does, here's the effect. If your opponent controls a card, you can then activate this card from your hand. Now, if you activate from your hand, it is going to stop you from using light, earth, and wind monsters. So in this extra deck, the cards that you really need to look out for, well, we'll start with the main deck. So that's Dotscaper, Light, Earth, and Wind. So Dotscaper, that is going to be your Link Spider. And I think that's it. Maybe I'm missing one, but yeah. So just be careful when you're using this from hand. It is going to, oh yeah, Firewall Dragon. So yeah, this will stop you from using some cards, so I try not to use it from my hand. If at all possible, I would rather set it. But anyway, yeah, you activate this card, and whenever you activate it, if they're using an effect that special summons a monster, you negate that effect. And if you have a trap in your graveyard, then you destroy that card. So pretty great card. You could run it as a 3 of if you want to. Maybe remove like your Juice Worm or something, and you could have 3 of it. It's up to you. And then let's get into the extra deck here. So 1 Link Decoder, this is pretty standard. You link off a card, and so long as it has over 2300 attack, then you, instead of it going to the graveyard, it comes right back. Linkaribo, this card is great. Whenever they use a trap card, you can quick effect to then negate that card. So if you're playing on some of these sites where like it's primarily like rogue deck players, like I don't know, Nexus or something, you just pop this, because what's gonna happen is they're gonna try to be like, oh, evenly matched. Nope, I don't care, bro. Linkaribo, you're done. It just means like they have to use actually more resources to burn through your deck. Not just one hand trap, or sorry, not just one board breaker is going to be enough. You're going to have to hand trap me into that board breaker if you want to actually get through my deck, or my board. Link Spider. At first, I did not understand why Link Spider, but after I really looked at Nibiru, it made more sense. Whenever they Nibiru your board, they put the token on your side of the board, and the token is a normal monster. Now, it is worth noting that with SP, these traps, and Shifter, it is possible when they Nibiru, they're not getting rid of all of our cards, just some of those cards. So what's going to happen is they Nibiru, they remove some of our board, they put a token on the board. We link off the token with Link Spider, and then we just keep comboing away. And speaking of combos, Splash Mage is here. Splash Mage, you give up 2 Cybers monsters, you link off 2 Cybers monsters, and then he brings one back from the grave. It can't use its effect, and you just keep comboing. When he is live, you are locked to Cypress, so keep that in mind. But once you link him off, you don't have to worry about that anymore. So just keep that in mind. Okay, we already went over all 3 of these ladies. Firewall Dragon, I haven't seen a list that doesn't have Firewall. He's great. Whenever he's co-linked, up to the number of co-linked cards you are linked to, you can then return those cards back to their hand. And if a monster is, or if a monster that this thing is pointing to is destroyed or sent to the graveyard, you can then special summon one Cyberse monster from your hand. The second effect doesn't really come up that much. It's mainly about the first effect. Like when I'm using this card, it's because I'm trying to win. Like I'm about to GG them. So that second effect does not come up that often, but you know it's there. Access Code Talker. This guy's a beast. You link off cards, you target some of the cards that you use to link off to get him, and then you banish cards on the field. And it's nice because when you go for Access Code Talker, I would use something like my Cryptor. So I would like link off, get my Cryptor, then link her off, get my Access Code Talker, target her in the graveyard, banish one card from the field. She goes up because he had to banish her. Or sorry, he doesn't banish, he just destroys. And then I would then summon her from the banish, and I have Access Code Talker with 5,300, and I have her with like 5,000 attack, and that's pretty much game. I'm probably going for a game. Usually when I have Access Code Talker, it's because this game is over now. Terahertz, this guy is great. I don't always use him, but he's great. He does not really work that well under Shifter because he needs to send cards to the grave. Like, it has to go from the deck or the extra deck to the grave. And it has to be a Cyberse monster. For every card he does that to, though, he gets 2,500 attack. And if it's a different attribute than him, then he can attack additional times. Now, we are primarily running a dark deck, so he's not going to get a lot of attacks, but he's still going to get a lot of attack. Usually, I get my terror to about 8,000 attack because we have this Cyberse Worm guy here. You send him to the grave. Like, what I do is you make him, and then you send this to the grave immediately. Then whenever your opponent is going to activate some kind of card, whether it be a spell or trap or an effect, you then just negate it. You just say, nope, done. And then we do have Pack Pit as an additional send. Pack Pit is a card that has started to really grow on me because you send this card as your second send, you discard one, and then you can push one back. So that does a quick effect too. So when they're going into their combo or they're pulling out their valuable enchant pieces, you just push it back and you say, you're done now. Additionally, if you're playing against decks like Yugioh, it's also really nice. You just push back a Yugioh. That's great. Keep in mind that this card right here. So where's the effects? And if you do this, okay, so you can always affect him once per turn. Okay, so what this card does is, right here, negate any effects of monsters activated by your opponent during the battle phase. So straight up, Tenpai is not allowed to do Tenpai things if they go to the battle phase with this card being here. So cards like that, or like Flow, they're not allowed to do that kind of stuff to you. So, very useful. We do have Haggard Lizard here. Link off 2 monsters, and then you can banish one from your graveyard, and then that card that you banished, you then could target one card on the field and change its attack. So this is kind of useful for when you need to beat over cards. I mean, if you have like an Ash in your grave, after you linked off, you make their attack 0. So with Cryptor, that could just spell Doom already. That could be GG already. And then we do have double SP here because it is nice for combos and dodging and stuff like that. And on the case where they get rid of your field spell, just having a second shifter is really, really good. You can obviously banish your Maliss links and get their effects too. So that's another thing as well. And then my my side is just here. You can run whenever you want. I do suggest running Harpy Feathers Jester with double Mulcharmies just to get you going. The other cards are up to you. Nibiru is great. Anti-Spell is awesome. Dimensional, Ryzeal is coming, so this is probably a card you want to think about because you can shut down XYZs. Pearly is still always around. Then you have Synchro, so decks like Tenpai. Then you have Yubel with its fusion cards. You can just say no fusion, so no Phantom. That's great. Macrocosm for the decks where they heavily need the graveyard, you can just say nope. So you can maybe replace your Shifter if you wanted to, or maybe some other cards. You can play around with this list, but if you found this list, useful, if you found it interesting, or if you have questions, please let me know in the comment section below, and stay tuned because I will be making more videos for Maliss and other decks in the near future.